Hey, real quick, if you're a fan, you're probably looking at everything happening lately and wondering what exactly is going on with this team. It's been a wild few days around the league, some unexpected moves, a few big rumors floating around, and honestly, it feels like things could shift in a big way at any moment. So let's talk about what's really happening, what it could mean moving forward, and why this situation might be a lot bigger than it looks at first glance. So click the like button and tell me, do you think John is doing a good job? I want to know your opinion. There was some crazy news around the NFL that could directly impact the Seattle Seahawks, and it all revolves around one name that fans across the league know very well: Maxx Crosby. The star edge rusher from the Las Vegas Raiders suddenly found himself right back at the center of trade rumors after a deal that was expected to shake. The league completely fell apart at the last second. Here's what happened. Over the weekend, the Baltimore Ravens were reportedly finalizing a trade with the Raiders that would have sent Maxx Crosby to Baltimore in exchange for 2 first-round picks, one in this year's draft and another in next year's draft. That type of package tells you exactly how valuable Crosby is around the league. He's one of the most disruptive pass rushers in football, a player capable of changing games and anchoring an entire defense. But just when it looked like the deal was done, everything collapsed. According to the reports, the Ravens backed out after reviewing Crosby's physical. Baltimore claimed they were not comfortable with how his knee looked during the evaluation, which immediately forced the Raiders to halt the trade and bring Crosby back into the organization. Suddenly, the edge rusher, who was supposed to be wearing purple and black, is once again wearing silver and black. But here's where things start to get really interesting for Seahawks fans. Even though Crosby returned to Las Vegas, the situation didn't exactly calm down. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that multiple teams have already called the Raiders asking about Crosby's availability. In other words, the phone lines in Las Vegas are busy. Teams around the NFL clearly believe there's still a chance that the Raiders could move him if the right offer comes along. And one of the teams rumored to be involved in those conversations? The Seattle Seahawks. There are reports that Seahawks general manager John Schneider has already reached out to the Raiders to inquire about Crosby. This shouldn't surprise anyone who follows Seattle closely. Schneider has always been aggressive when elite defensive talent becomes available, especially pass rushers who can transform a defense overnight. At one point earlier in the process, the Seahawks were even rumored to have offered a similar package to the one Baltimore attempted to send to Las Vegas before the trade deadline. However, the Raiders reportedly declined that offer at the time. Part of the reason could have been the draft position involved. If Seattle finished near the bottom of the first round, the Raiders may have viewed that pick as less valuable compared to what other teams could offer. And that raises a major question about how realistic a deal actually is, because the Raiders' expectations appear to be extremely high. Reports suggest they believe Crosby is worth 2 first-round picks. That's a massive price tag for any player, even a superstar pass rusher. Some proposed trade packages floating around include something like a 2026 first-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, and potentially an additional player such as Tyrese Knight. But many believe that kind of deal might actually be an overpay for Seattle. A more realistic proposal might be something closer to a first-round pick in 2026 and a third-round pick in 2027. Even that could still be considered expensive, depending on how the Raiders evaluate Crosby's long-term health. And that brings us to the biggest concern in this entire situation: the knee injury that reportedly scared Baltimore away. There are questions about whether Crosby's knee could affect his longevity. Some believe the Ravens used the physical as an excuse to escape the trade, while others think there may be legitimate long-term concerns. Either way, it changes the way teams might value him. If there's any doubt about how long he can stay dominant, teams will be far more cautious about giving up multiple first-round picks. Still, Crosby's camp insists that everything is trending in the right direction. According to his representatives, he is actually ahead of schedule in his recovery and is expected to participate during the off-season program. That would obviously ease concerns for teams considering making a big move. Now, from Seattle's perspective, this becomes a fascinating strategic debate. John Schneider has built his reputation on finding talent in the draft, developing players, and building strong rosters without constantly sacrificing high draft picks. That philosophy helped create the foundation for the Legion of Boom era and many successful Seahawks teams. Giving up multiple first-round picks would go against that approach. But at the same time, adding a player like Maxx Crosby could immediately elevate the Seahawks' defense to another level. An elite edge rusher can transform a defensive front, create pressure without heavy blitzing, and give a defensive coordinator far more flexibility. So the big debate for Seahawks fans right now is simple. Is Maxx Crosby worth the price? Because if the Raiders truly want 2 first-round picks, that is a massive investment. But if the price drops due to the physical concerns or market pressure, Seattle might suddenly become a very serious contender to land one of the NFL's best pass rushers. And with rumors swirling and teams already calling Las Vegas, this situation could develop very quickly. So now I want to hear directly from the 12s. If you were running the Seahawks, would you make the move and trade major draft capital to bring Maxx Crosby to Seattle? Or would you trust John Schneider to keep building through the draft instead? At the same time, there is another layer to this entire situation that Seahawks fans cannot ignore. And that is what has already happened during this free agency period. Because, while all the attention is on a potential blockbuster move like Maxx Crosby, the reality is that Seattle has already experienced a lot of roster change in a very short amount of time. In fact, the Seahawks have already lost 4 notable players during this NFL free agency cycle. Riq Woolen is now with the Philadelphia Eagles. Kobe Bryant signed with the Chicago Bears. Kenneth Walker is now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. And Boy Mafe has moved on to the Cincinnati Bengals, where he is expected to replace Trey Hendrickson. Those are 4 talented players who were part of Seattle's recent core. Losing that much talent naturally creates concern among the fan base. But there may actually be a long-term strategy behind what we are seeing. NFL insider Jeremy Fowler warned not long ago that something like this could happen. According to Fowler, Seattle could lose several good players in free agency, but potentially receive compensatory draft picks in return, which the team could later use to continue building the roster through the draft. And when you look at the current projections, those comp picks could actually be pretty valuable. Right now, the expected return for the Seahawks could include a 4th-round compensatory pick in the 2027 NFL Draft for Boy Mafe leaving. On top of that, Seattle could receive 2 5th-round picks tied to the departures of Kobe Bryant and Kenneth Walker. Riq Woolen's departure could add a 6th-round compensatory pick as well. Now, yes, these are still projections. The compensatory pick formula can change depending on how players perform with their new teams and whether Seattle signs other free agents later. But even as projections, this is still a significant potential return, because suddenly the Seahawks could end up with a large amount of draft capital in the 2027 draft. And if you know anything about how John Schneider operates, you know that draft capital is extremely valuable to him. For years, Schneider has built the Seahawks by identifying young talent, drafting them, developing them, and letting the coaching staff mold them into impact players. That formula is exactly how the legendary Legion of Boom defense was built in the first place. But the organization also learned some lessons from that era. During the peak years of the Legion of Boom, Seattle eventually paid massive contracts to several stars who had originally been developed in-house. While many of those players deserved the money, Some of those deals later became difficult for the team to manage. Eventually, the roster lost flexibility and the team began to decline. And that experience may be influencing the strategy we are seeing today. Instead of overpaying in free agency, Schneider appears to be prioritizing roster flexibility, draft assets, and younger players who can grow within Mike Macdonald's system. The idea seems to be simple. Keep bringing in hungry young talent, and allow the coaching staff to develop them into the next wave of impact players. Of course, that doesn't mean the Seahawks won't make moves. Right now, we're only a few days into free agency, and Seattle hasn't made any huge splash signings yet. Most of the activity so far has involved re-signing players already on the roster, rather than bringing in big outside names. But that doesn't mean the front office is inactive behind the scenes. Sometimes the smartest moves are the ones that happen quietly. In fact, some around the league believe the Seahawks could still make a few sneaky signings later in free agency once the market settles and player prices drop. Those are the types of deals that often end up becoming incredible value for teams that stay patient. And that brings everything back to the central question of this entire situation. Do the Seahawks stay patient and continue building through the draft, stockpiling compensatory picks, and developing young talent the way John Schneider prefers? Or do they take a big swing and try to land a game-changing superstar like Maxx Crosby, if the opportunity presents itself? Because both strategies have logic behind them. One path is slow, methodical, and focused on long-term sustainability. The other is aggressive and could immediately transform Seattle's defensive front. Right now, the Seahawks' free agency period might not look flashy. Some fans might even be frustrated by the lack of major signings. But if the long-term plan works, Seattle could end up with a roster full of young, hungry players and a massive amount of draft capital to keep the pipeline flowing for years to come. And if one or two strategic moves happen along the way, whether that's a surprising free agent signing or even a bold trade, the Seahawks could quietly be setting themselves up for something much bigger. So keep your notifications on, stay locked in, and don't miss any breaking news surrounding the Seattle Seahawks. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, and click the video that's appearing on your screen right now. The latest Seahawks news and updates are always coming first right here, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Go Seahawks!